Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
I'd like to pause for a conversation about Africa this morning. Nigeria's economy grew at its fastest pace in 3 years at the end of 2024. After a period of some turbulence and economic slowdown, GDP in fact grew by 3.84% in annual terms, led by the services sector. But as oil prices look set to stall this year, Nigeria is looking to plug the gap with international trade and foreign direct investment. And to our guest in the radio studio this morning, delighted to welcome Yusuf Tuggar, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Nigeria on a visit to the UK today. A warm welcome to you, alongside our Bloomberg reporter Tiwa Adebayo, for a conversation about Nigeria this morning. But of course, we have to speak firstly about the geopolitical flux that we are in currently. President Trump reversing US support for Ukraine, putting tariffs on allies, reshaping in many senses the Western axis. Where do you think, Minister, that Nigeria's place is in this new world order? Good morning.
Morning. Nigeria's place is first and foremost sitting on 207 trillion cubic feet of gas. So it presents opportunity for us as a destination for big tech, for AI, data miners. These are things that consume a lot of energy, and energy we have. And we've always maintained the position that having a reliable and affordable source of energy is something that should go hand in hand with the energy transition. And that's what we've been working on.
Minister, thank you for joining us. We're just talking about the rich resources in Nigeria and in the continent of Africa as a whole. But last week at the G20 meetings in South Africa, notable absences were senior Trump administration officials. Do they recognise the potential of Nigeria and of Africa?
They do. I believe they do, because there are US IOCs in Nigeria. Chevron is there, ExxonMobil is there, and Nigeria and the US have maintained good relations, close relations since the inception of Nigeria, since we became independent in 1960. So they're not oblivious to what is going on in Nigeria. We're currently also working on two significant gas pipelines. We have the African Atlantic gas pipeline that it would see Nigerian gas delivered to Morocco via almost 15 West African littoral states, and then possibly on to Europe via the Maghreb line. And then we have the Trans-Saharan gas pipeline also through Niger onto Algeria and possibly to Europe.
Given that history of long cooperation, then, were you disappointed not to see them at that G20 meeting in South Africa on the continent?
Well, they were not present. They had a representative there. I believe there was a chargé d'affaires from the U.S. Embassy in South Africa. So, I mean, these things happen. You have summits where China doesn't show up or Russia doesn't show up, but it's not to say that the U.S. no longer has a vested interest in matters that affect the global economy. But more importantly, we want to see Nigeria also in there, in the G20, speaking up for the global south, for Africa, for sub-Saharan Africa.
But that is the question mark, isn't it, now around the Trump White House, the concern that actually the priority is on economic ties, you know, perhaps to the detriment of security issues. I mean, I was listening to one of your speeches last week. You were talking about the need to respect sovereign states, the need, for example, for a two-state framework in Israel and Gaza. Is the United States still a reliable partner for you?
For us, the U.S. remains a reliable partner because we have never been focused exclusively on multilateralism and lulling ourselves into thinking that national interest was no more, or the Westphalian state system was no longer in existence because of multilateralism. They go hand in hand. It's always remained there. So it's, if you like, the difference between realism and constructivism, and they've always existed side by side, and that's why I suppose this was a wake-up call or a rude awakening, but it's a reality check, and we must get on with diplomacy, with statecraft, and work around things. But that's the beauty of democracy as well, because we have term limits, we have changes in policy, and when we lose elections, we go back to think tanks and hone our skills and our policies and come back. So that's geopolitics, and the international system is an anarchic system, and it always will be.
Just on that point of the changing face of geopolitics, and particularly around diplomacy, you say that the election of Donald Trump has been a wake-up call or reality check. Do you see that potentially changing your approach to diplomacy, particularly around Nigeria's relationship with China? There's been historically deep economic ties, particularly in relation to infrastructure, but we've just seen this morning the US has doubled tariff levies on China. Do you see that changing your relationship with China? Will you have to tread more carefully, perhaps?
No, we don't. Nigeria is a fearless country. Nigeria's foreign policy has always been guided by moral precepts and ethical conduct, and we were non-aligned, and now the fulcrum of our foreign policy is strategic autonomy. So it's more or less the same thing. So we look out for our national interests, but at the same time we're responsible citizens of the world, and we make sure we work with others, and we don't allow anyone to dictate to us who our friends should be.
Okay. Have you seen a drop-off in support from allies, including the US and UK, when it comes to domestic security issues, if we can talk about that for a moment, including military support for the fight or the battle against Boko Haram, for example? Has there been a drop-off in that sort of support?
No, we have not. We never had US troops in Nigeria, unlike some of our neighbors. We never had UK troops in our neighbors, unlike our neighbors. So we continue to collaborate with them. We always had a problem with the Leahy law. We weren't being sold equipment, and we have resorted to, besides sourcing it in other countries, we're also looking to manufacture, produce, so that we go back to that strategic autonomy I was speaking to. So we're not like some of our neighbors that had them there present. So, and it was Nigeria that led ECOMOG to resettle Sierra Leone. It was Nigeria that led ECOMOG to resettle Liberia. We actually succeeded in peace building where others actually failed. And some of the failures that we're experiencing today in the Sahel have to do with the fact that Nigeria was not included. Nigeria was not part of the G5 Sahel, Operation Barkhane, EU Sahel strategy.
In terms of the gas pipeline, I want to go back then to the economics of it. How big do you think that business is going to be, and how reliable will that be if you're trying to get that pipeline into Europe?
It's going to be huge. We would look to attract US investors, European investors, Chinese investors.
Have you had indications on this trip that might happen?
We have brought it up. The discussions are ongoing. We have a platform for further discussions with the United Kingdom. We have what we refer to as a strategic partnership that covers different sectors. So that is something we're going to pursue further.
I just have to ask you, Minister, since you're in the UK, on the question of the Benin bronzes. We heard recently that the Netherlands are planning on sending back over 100 Benin bronzes. There are supposedly 900 just in the British Museum alone. In your discussions with UK officials on your visit, is that something you've raised, and is it something that you want to see those Benin bronzes returned to Nigeria?
Certainly, it's something that our mission here, our embassy, our High Commission, has been working on and has been discussing with the British authorities. I know the subject very well because as ambassador in Germany, I worked on the return of 1,328 Benin bronzes from German public museums. So it's not easy, and especially in a country like the United Kingdom and France, where the laws were changed or made specifically for that to sort of preclude the return.
Okay, so that on the Benin bronzes. In terms of you're here to forge greater alliances with businesses in the UK to try to attract inward investment, and especially into the tech sector in Nigeria. What is the kind of growth potential that you see? What are the sorts of noises that you've heard from businesses here about those sorts of business ties between the two? What's the kind of biggest hope that you've got?
There's a huge potential in business process outsourcing, because for us it's a growth area, and we see it also as a panacea to the irksome debate between the two countries to do with irregular migration, because we have businesses. In fact, I came along with one of them that is on the lookout for Nigerians with British accents to recruit in her business, in her BPO business. She is also working on expanding her remote learning business aspect of the business, because we have seen a reduction in the issuance of visas to Nigerians to British universities. And we know that the British universities are quite keen on having Nigerians because they continue to grant them admission, but they can't get enough visas. So remote learning might be an alternative to that, so long as it would be properly structured, accredited, and all of that.
Okay. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. We have to leave it there. Yusuf Tuggar is Minister of Foreign Affairs of Nigeria, but we thank you very much for coming in person into the radio studio and just giving us some of the details of your trip to the UK, some of the main priorities for Nigeria, alongside Bloomberg reporter Tiwa Adebayo. Thank you so much for your time.